Hello and welcome to Quicktail English. Today we share a true and tragic story from history, the Challenger disaster. The date was January 28, 1986. The place was Cape Canaveral, Florida, USA. It was a very important day for NASA and for the whole world. The Space Shuttle Challenger was ready for its 10th mission, known as STS-51L. This mission was special because of one person, Krista McAuliffe. Krista McAuliffe was a high school teacher from New Hampshire. She was part of the Teacher in Space project. Her goal was to be the first ordinary citizen, not a professional astronaut, to travel to space. She planned to teach lessons from orbit to millions of students watching on television. This project brought great excitement. For many people, especially children, the launch was a moment of hope and pride. People all over the world were watching the television broadcast. The Challenger carried 7 brave people, a team of professional astronauts, and the teacher. Francis Dick Scobie, commander. Michael J. Smith, pilot. Ronald McNair, mission specialist. Ellison Onizuka, mission specialist. Judith Resnick, mission specialist. Gregory Jarvis, payload specialist. Krista McAuliffe, payload specialist, teacher. The launch had delays, postponements, for several days because of bad weather and technical problems. The final day, January 28th, was sunny, but it was also very cold. The temperature was freezing, much colder than any previous shuttle launch. This very cold weather was a serious concern for some people. The Challenger used 2 large solid rocket boosters, SRBs, to fly up. These boosters were built in sections. Between the sections there were O-rings, which are large rubber rings used to seal, close tightly, the joints. They needed to be flexible to work correctly. The engineers from the company that made the boosters, Thiokol, had a worried meeting the night before the launch. They told NASA that the rubber O-rings might not work correctly in the freezing cold. They were afraid that the rubber would become too hard and could not seal the joint well enough. They strongly recommended that NASA delay the launch until the temperature was warmer. However, the NASA managers felt pressure. The launch had already been delayed too many times, and the whole world was watching. The managers rejected, the engineers' technical warnings. They decided to continue with the launch schedule, believing the risk was small. This decision would later become a major part of the tragedy. The morning arrived. Everyone watched the countdown clock. The air was full of excitement and anticipation. The commentators on television spoke about the perfect conditions, not mentioning the freezing temperature or the engineers' serious warnings. The clock hit T-0. At 11:38 a.m. Eastern Time, the engines roared. The Challenger lifted off the launch pad. It was a beautiful sight, a massive vehicle rising into the sky with a huge cloud of white smoke and fire. The announcers said, "We have liftoff. The vehicle is clear of the tower." For the first few seconds, everything seemed normal and strong. But at T plus 0.678 seconds, less than 1 second after liftoff, a puff of black smoke appeared near the bottom of the right SRB. This small puff was the first sign of the failure. The cold O-rings had not sealed the joint correctly. Extremely hot gas, fire, was escaping through the tiny hole. The ship continued to climb. The little puff of smoke disappeared, but the problem was still there, hidden. The hole was closing and opening again as the ship moved in the wind. At T plus 58 seconds, the Challenger was moving at high speed, almost 2 times the speed of sound. The pressure and the wind made the hole in the O-ring joint bigger. A steady stream of flame, very hot gas, began to shoot out from the side of the right SRB. The flame hit the large external tank, which carried the liquid fuel, hydrogen, and oxygen. The intense heat quickly damaged the tank structure. At T plus 73 seconds, just 73 seconds into the flight, the whole vehicle was nearly 10 miles or 16 kilometers above the Atlantic Ocean. The structural failure was complete. The external tank violently broke apart. The huge explosion of the fuel tank created a massive, chaotic cloud of fire and smoke. On the ground, everyone was watching the beautiful shape of the rocket suddenly disappear into a massive, uncontrolled cloud. The announcer said, "We have a problem," and his voice became very serious. Then, silence followed, a terrible, heavy silence. The explosion broke the space shuttle apart. The Challenger was destroyed. The 7 astronauts were lost. The world watched in shock. In schools across the United States, children were watching their teacher, Krista McAuliffe, make history. Instead, they saw a sudden, terrible tragedy. President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation that evening. He spoke to the children and honored the 7 heroes. The investigation, called the Rogers Commission, began immediately. They worked for months, collecting millions of pieces of evidence from the ocean. The investigation found the cause of the disaster: the rubber O-rings. The failure was directly related to the extremely cold temperature on the morning of the launch, just as the engineers had warned. The investigation also found a serious problem with NASA's safety culture. The communication was bad, and managers ignored the clear warnings from the technical experts. They put the schedule and the public relations above the safety of the crew. The Challenger disaster taught the world a hard and very sad lesson about the risk of space travel, the importance of listening to warnings, and the high price of technical failure. The 7 people who were lost, the crew of STS-51L, are remembered as pioneers and heroes who gave their lives for exploration. Thank you for joining QuickTale English. Subscribe for more real stories from history and continue practicing your B1 English. See you next time.